I saw a meme on Instagram the other day of a young man in his 20s, and he asked, what the hell happened in 1984? And I thought, that's a fair question, because 1984 gave us Ghostbusters, Gremlins, The Karate Kid, and Beverly Hills Cop, while the same release calendar also held The Terminator, A Nightmare on Elm Street, Purple Rain, Footloose, and The Last Starfighter. Ghostbusters and Gremlins opened on the same day, with The Karate Kid arriving 2 weeks later, and these were movies I encountered at such different points in my life that I had never really pictured them sitting on the same marquee. And once I checked the meme against the actual release calendar and started comparing it with the rest of the decade, the question grew into something bigger, and eventually led me back to the first movie I ever made with my dad, using a toy Millennium Falcon and a home video camera. Hi, I'm Matthew Lawrence. I've been a filmmaker and editor for over 30 years. Welcome to The Rough Cut. The 1984 slate is ridiculous. Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom opened on May 23rd, Star Trek III followed on June 1st, and 1 week later Ghostbusters and Gremlins opened against each other, with The Karate Kid reaching theaters before the end of the month. The summer continued through The Last Starfighter, Purple Rain, and Red Dawn, while the later months brought The Terminator and A Nightmare on Elm Street before Beverly Hills Cop arrived in December. And that still leaves out Splash, Romancing the Stone, Footloose, Police Academy, 16 Candles, Revenge of the Nerds, The Natural, Amadeus, The Never-Ending Story, and This is Spinal Tap. I didn't experience all of these movies in 1984. Some reached me in a theater while others waited for VHS or found me years later. The Last Starfighter did reach me when I was a Star Wars kid, and a movie about someone being recruited into an interstellar war because he was good at a video game was practically a documentary about my future plans. Now, 1982 can make a serious competing argument with E.T., Blade Runner, The Thing, Poltergeist, Star Trek II, First Blood, Tron, and Fast Times at Ridgemont High. But 1984 currently has more movies preserved in the National Film Registry than any other year of that decade. The slate holds up, which means the real question is how so many different movies found their way through the system at the same time. My first answer was the obvious one. Hollywood seemed less afraid of failure. But the budgets make that answer more precise. Just put Ghostbusters next to A Nightmare on Elm Street. Ghostbusters began as a gigantic Dan Aykroyd concept that Ivan Reitman believed could have cost around $200 million. Reitman and Harold Ramis brought the story down to earth. They planted it in New York and turned the Ghostbusters into regular guys trying to start a business. Columbia made that version for approximately $30 million and got it into theaters barely a year after the project was pitched. A Nightmare on Elm Street reached theaters for about $1.7 million. New Line assembled the financing with foreign production partners, then gave Wes Craven enough room to turn a man with knives for fingers into something genuinely frightening. The Karate Kid found its audience for about $8 million, while James Cameron made The Terminator for roughly $6.5 million. That range gave both movies a legitimate path into theaters. Hollywood already understood sequels, but Ghostbusters, Gremlins, The Karate Kid, and The Terminator were untested ideas asking an audience to show up for the first time. They became intellectual property because the original films connected. Getting them financed explains how they reached the set. What happened once the cameras started rolling, well, that's why we still remember them. Practical effects seems like the obvious visual thread here because Ghostbusters and Gremlins put creatures into the frame with the actors, but then The Last Starfighter wrecks that explanation by using computer-generated imagery, when CGI barely existed in feature films. The tools were different, but the attitude was remarkably consistent. These movies acted as though the premise deserved complete commitment. Ghostbusters may be the clearest example because cinematographer Laszlo Kovacs brought an unusual naturalism to a story moving between comedy and horror. The ghosts became more credible because the world around them remains grounded. The firehouse feels used, while the roof of the apartment building is an enormous set beneath a storm tearing open above Manhattan. Bill Murray can stand there delivering jokes because the camera never treats the situation like one. Gremlins makes the same commitment to its creatures. Gizmo is adorable, but the Gremlins are allowed to become genuinely dangerous, giving the comedy an edge and keeping the puppets from feeling like merchandise wandering through the frame. The Last Starfighter went in another direction completely with its computer-generated spacecraft, while The Natural built its mythology through Caleb Deschanel's photography and those period locations around Buffalo. By the time Roy Hobbs sends that final ball into the lights, we're no longer watching an ordinary baseball game. We're watching someone become a legend. There wasn't one visual style or effects technique holding 1984 together. The connection was conviction, and I think that's part of what people mean when they say they don't make them like they used to. They're remembering movies that committed to their own ideas before asking the audience to do the same. The theatrical run was only the beginning, because another machine was changing how an entire generation lived with movies. And in my house, that machine came with a camera. VHS didn't create the 1984 slate. It changed what happened after the theatrical run. A movie could keep circulating through rental stores and cable, giving audiences time to discover what they had missed. My family got our first video system around 1983. It was a two-piece Quasar VHS setup that came with its own camera. My dad and I aimed that camera at a miniature Millennium Falcon and made a little movie with it. It was pretty bad, but it was also pretty fun. And without realizing it, I had taken the first step towards the career I would spend the next 30 years building. The same machine bringing movies into our house had given me my first way to make one. For a long time, in my tiny hometown of Minooka, Illinois, we had one video rental store, and walking through those shelves felt like gaining access to a world that had previously been hidden from me. However, the movies didn't arrive in box office order. A major hit could sit beside something that barely survived its opening weekend, and if the cover caught your attention, well, both had another chance to find an audience. And that's how one release year could stretch across the rest of your life. 1984 kept arriving long after 1984 was over. Now, the machine is changing again. Curry Barker built an audience through YouTube and made Obsession for approximately $750,000, and the movie has earned more than $400 million worldwide. Kane Parsons used his original Backrooms video to demonstrate a visual idea and attract an audience before the feature existed. Those are extraordinary outliers, but they prove an original idea can establish its value before the traditional system decides what to do with it. The ladder that existed in Hollywood in 1984 may be rebuilding somewhere else, directly between filmmakers and their audiences. So what the hell happened in 1984? Hollywood could make room for a $30 million ghost comedy and a $1.7 million nightmare, while the filmmakers behind both were allowed to treat those strange ideas as real movies. Home video gave those movies a much longer life and allowed one remarkable release year to unfold across the decades that followed. In my house, it also put a camera in my hands. Audiences are still showing up when an original movie gives them a reason, and the tools required to create that movie are closer than they have ever been. Maybe the next 1984 won't arrive as a slate handed down by Hollywood. Maybe filmmakers will have to build it themselves, one movie at a time. I'm Matthew Lawrence. This has been The Rough Cut, a filmmaker's perspective with no apologies. If you made it this far, drop something in the comments. If a movie from 1984 still matters to you, tell me which one and how you first discovered it. I genuinely want to know. If this is the kind of breakdown you came for, do me a favor, hit that subscribe button, and I will see you in the edit room.